It was 3 a.m., and the hospital felt like a tomb. My husband, Michael, was barely clinging to life, or so I thought. Then, a nurse slipped a crumpled note into my hand, a message that would shatter my entire world. Don't come again. Check the camera. 3 o'clock in the morning. Mercy General Hospital in the heart of Chicago was a silent, sprawling beast, its white walls echoing with an unsettling quiet. The antiseptic smell clung to everything, thick and suffocating, making my head ache and my lungs feel tight. I sat hunched on a hard folding chair, my spine screaming in protest, a dull tremor running through my body. Every creak of the chair, every shift, was a risk of waking Michael, the man I loved, my husband. He lay there, a tangle of ropes and pulleys, both legs trapped in thick white casts. He looked so vulnerable, like fate had put him on painful display. When a soft moan escaped his lips, sweat beading on his forehead, I was instantly awake. My own legs, numb from sitting, felt like they didn't belong to me. Gently, I held a straw to his lips. "Mike, drink some water," I whispered, "just sip slowly. It'll help with the dryness." Those eyes, once so full of kindness they could melt my heart, were now bloodshot, clouded with what looked like guilt and weakness. "Emily, this is too hard on you," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "I was so careless on the road. Now you have to take time off work to care for me. I feel so useless." I forced a faint smile, my own voice trembling slightly. "Don't be silly, Michael. We're husband and wife. The stronger one helps the weaker one. You're laid up now, so I'll take care of you. If it were me, you'd do the same. This is our life. There's nothing to be ashamed of." I used a tissue to wipe a few drops of water from the corner of his mouth, but my heart felt a deep, sharp pang. Just 3 days earlier, Michael's car had slammed into a median, a victim of sudden brake failure, the police report said. He was lucky to be alive, but the doctor's words still echoed in my mind, a death knell for our future, severe fractures with nerve compression. Prepare yourselves. There's a chance he might be in a wheelchair for a long time. For Michael, whose career was finally taking off, it was a death sentence. For me, Emily, a 30-year-old forensic accountant, it felt like someone had just demolished the entire life I had spent a decade building, brick by painful brick. Our careers, our home, our dreams of children, everything we'd sketched out together was put on an indefinite, terrifying pause in a single night. For 3 agonizing days, I had barely slept. During daylight hours, I clung to that chair, monitoring his 4 drip of medications, all while trying to juggle emails and reports from my fam on my laptop. At night, I forced myself awake every 2 hours to help him shift position, give him a sponge bath, and change his bedpan, ensuring his casts stayed dry. Every nerve in my body was stretched taut, a violin string ready to snap at the slightest touch. "Where's Chloe?" Michael asked after a few sips, his eyes scanning the room. He tried to sound casual, but his gaze darted around, landing briefly on the empty chair on the other side of the bed. "She went home to make you some bone broth," I replied, adjusting his fall. "She said she'll bring it tomorrow to help you get your strength back." I practically had to force her to go home and get some sleep herself. Chloe, Michael's younger cousin, had just graduated college and moved to the city, staying with us until she found her own place. She was sweet-talking, quick on her feet, and in these 3 days, she'd been a lifesaver. Running errands, handling paperwork, buying meals. Without her, I honestly felt I would have collapsed. I was genuinely, profoundly grateful. Michael sighed, closing his eyes, his voice tinged with a feigned pity. "Don't let her work too hard. And you need to get some rest too. You look paler than the patient." I was about to tease him, to lighten the suffocating mood, when the door creaked open. The soft roll of wheels followed. It was Sarah, the head nurse, a woman in her 40s with an impassive face that seemed to have witnessed too much life and death to be surprised by anything anymore. She rarely spoke, worked with quiet efficiency, and usually kept her distance. But for the past few days, her gaze would linger on me as she passed, a look of thoughtful consideration, as if she was debating something, then deciding against it. Bed 7. Time for your medication, Sarah murmured, pushing her cart towards Michael's bed, her voice low. I quickly moved aside. Thank you, Sarah. You work so hard. She didn't reply. Donning gloves, she gently lifted the blanket, checking his casts and the urinary catheter. Her movements were skilled, but her eyes, sharp as a scalpel, darted from Michael's face to his legs, then settled on the full bag. Could you go to the nurse's station and grab 2 more bags of saline for me? This one's almost empty, and I'm out on my cart. She turned to me, her tone leaving no room for argument. I was taken aback. Tasks like this were usually for nursing assistants, but her serious expression silenced my questions. I nodded, turning to leave. It was then, as I passed her, that I felt something small and cool pressed into my hand. A folded piece of paper slipped into my palm with incredible speed. The sudden, cold touch startled me like a pinprick, and I almost cried out. But Sarah had her back to me, pretending to adjust Michael's pillow. With her other hand hidden, she made a swift, unmistakable gesture, index finger to her lips. Silence. My heart seized in my chest. The instincts of a forensic accountant, someone who spots irregularities for a living, screamed at me. Something was terribly wrong. I didn't turn back. I didn't stop. My hand clenched around that paper as I walked straight out into the deserted hallway. The corridor was utterly deserted, the only sound the low hum of the air conditioner. I walked purposefully to the corner leading to a small kitchenette, a blind spot the nurses jokingly called the camera-free zone. The light there was a dim, sickly yellow, barely enough to see. I pressed my back against the wall, taking deep, shuddering breaths to steady my trembling hands. The paper, crumpled and damp with my own sweat, slowly unfolded. I hoped desperately it was just a prescription, a minor instruction. But the scribbled words that appeared under that feeble light sent a shockwave through me, a chill that went straight to my bones. Stop coming. Check last night's security camera. Is faking sleep. Just those few, hurried words, scrawled in smeared ink. To me, it felt like someone had just dumped a bucket of ice water over my head. My scalp tingled, my palms went cold. Faking sleep? Michael? What happened last night? Imagine being in that situation. Your husband, the man you've sworn to spend your life with, lies injured, possibly disabled, and you've dropped everything to care for him. Then, in the dead of night, a famously stoic nurse secretly hands you that note. My head spun, a chaotic storm of fear and confusion. The past 3 days flashed before my eyes like a fast-forwarded tape. Michael always complained of pain, especially if I got too close to his casted legs. He'd refuse to let me look at the injuries, saying, "It's too gruesome, Emily. Don't look." His phone, which he never used to lock, was now always tucked tightly under his pillow at night. The moment a text came in, he'd silence it instantly. And Chloe, it seemed every time she entered the room, he'd moan more, appear weaker. But when it was just the two of us, I sometimes felt he was in less pain, though he tried to hide it by closing his eyes, holding his breath. I'd dismissed it all before, telling myself I was just paranoid, exhausted. But now, under that dim yellow light, with those chilling words on that paper, all those scattered grains of sand suddenly clicked, strung together into a long, tight chain that squeezed the very air from my throat. I stood frozen in that kitchenette for what felt like an eternity, until the sharp bite of my nails digging into my palms brought me back to reality. Don't panic. I wasn't just a wife. I was a forensic accountant. For years, my training had taught me one thing. When you find an anomaly, you find the evidence. You don't jump to conclusions. With that thought, I tore the note into tiny, unidentifiable pieces, dropped them into the toilet, and flushed until nothing remained. Then, I bent down, splashing cold water on my face. Looking up into the mirror, I saw a woman with a pale face and eyes sunken from lack of sleep. But something in her gaze had irrevocably changed. The familiar softness was replaced by a thin, cold glint. "Get it together, Emily," I whispered to myself, my voice fiercely quiet. Crying, screaming, fighting, none of that will solve anything right now. You need the truth. I turned on the faucet, grabbed the 2 bags of saline Sarah had requested, and walked back to the room. As I entered, I forced my expression to remain calm, a mask as carefully constructed as Michael's now appeared to be. Sarah, I've got the saline. In her eyes, I saw 2 things clearly, pity and a quiet determination. She took the bags, hung a new one, and checked the 4-line one last time. Then, as if talking to herself, she murmured, "He should be stable tonight. You should try to get some rest. We'll call you if anything happens." I nodded my thanks, but didn't sit down. I stood there for a long time, watching Michael. He lay still again, eyes closed, breathing evenly. To an outsider, he was a pitiful husband suffering from broken legs, with his devoted, exhausted wife standing by his side. But in my mind, after that note, Michael's face had become utterly unfamiliar, like a masterfully painted mask. Asterisk tonight, I'll let you sleep. Tomorrow, we'll see what's real, asterisk I thought silently, unsure if I was talking to him or to myself. That night, for the first time in 3 days, I didn't stay awake counting his groans. I lay down on the folding chair, pulled the blanket up, and stared at the ceiling with wide, unblinking eyes. A single thought repeated, a cold mantra in my mind. Asterisk tomorrow, I have to see that hospital footage. No matter what. Asterisk the next morning, as the first weak rays of sunlight pierced through the window, I got up to draw the blinds and adjust Michael's blanket. My body felt weak, as if I'd just recovered from a long fever, but my mind was strangely, terrifyingly alert. The moment I opened my eyes, Sarah's words on the note reappeared, clear as day. Stop coming. Check last night's security camera. His faking sleep. Michael was still lying quietly, eyes closed, lips dry, occasionally wincing as if in pain. Then Chloe walked in, carrying a container of soup. Seeing me awake, she chirped, "Emily, you up? I just made some bone broth for Mike to help him get his strength back. You must not have slept well last night. Look at those dark circles." My gaze flickered to Michael. His eyes were still closed, but his shoulders trembled slightly, as if he were trying to suppress a groan. To any outsider, it would have looked like a family united in overcoming a tragedy. Just yesterday, I would have smiled and thanked Chloe, my heart warmed by my considerate sister-in-law. But this morning, everything I saw was distorted, like looking into a cracked mirror where every reflection shattered into sharp, jagged pieces. I smoothed my hair back, keeping my voice even, almost unnaturally calm. "Thanks, Chloe. I have to stop by the office for a bit. They need me to sign some urgent documents. Can you stay here and keep an eye on Mike for me? Call me if anything happens." Hearing this, Michael slowly opened his eyes, looking at me with feigned concern. "Emily, will you be long? I feel anxious being here alone. You've been taking care of everything these past few days, leaving me with a kid." "What are you talking about? Chloe has been a huge help to us." I turned and smiled at Chloe, then patted Michael's hand, reassuringly. "I'll only be a few hours. Just take it easy. If you need anything, call a nurse." After I spoke, I bent down to adjust the traction ropes and the bandages on his back. My movements were as careful as always. But inside, there was a cold, empty void. Asterisk, is he really acting? Asterisk, I quickly gathered my coat, handbag, and laptop. Chloe took the bag from me, not forgetting to add, "Drive safe, Emily. Come back for lunch. We can have takeout. Don't eat out too much. All that greasy food is bad for you." I nodded, looking back at Michael one last time. He grabbed my hand, his eyes bloodshot, the perfect picture of a man terrified of being abandoned. "Emily, I'm so sorry. What if I end up disabled? If it gets too hard for you, please don't leave me. Don't divorce me, okay? You're the only reason I'm still alive." If this were yesterday, I probably would have cried. I would have rushed to assure him, asterisk, "I will never leave you," asterisk, but now, all I felt was a cold lump in my throat. I gently pulled my hand away and forced a smile. "What are you thinking? I'm just stepping out for a bit. I'll be back. Lie still and don't move too much, or it will hurt more." Chloe is here, and the nurses are here. No one is abandoning you. I turned and walked out of the room. The door clicked shut behind me. A soft sound, but to my ears, it was the sound of a life splitting irrevocably in two. Instead of heading for the main exit, I descended into the hospital's parking garage. It was a vast, dimly lit space, reeking of gasoline and damp concrete. I found a secluded spot, parked close to the wall, rolled up the windows, and locked the doors. Only in that sealed space, cut off from the world, did I allow myself to exhale a long, slow breath. I took out my phone and found Kevin's contact. Kevin, a few years behind me in college, now worked in cybersecurity for a software company. I sent him a text. Kevin, I need your help with something personal. It's urgent and has to be completely confidential. I'll pay you well. The scene receipt appeared almost instantly, typical for a guy glued to a screen. What's up, Emily? Just tell me what you need. A round of drinks is on you next time. I bit my lip and typed, I need to see the internal security footage from Mercer General Hospital, Orthopedic Ward, room 307 from around 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. last night. Is there any way you can get access? As soon as I sent the message, my heart started pounding against my ribs. I knew this wasn't exactly by the book, but I also knew that if I didn't, I might spend the rest of my life living in a terrifying state of uncertainty. A moment later, Kevin called me directly. Emily, this is a big one. It's a public hospital, and their system isn't a joke, but it's not impossible. Give me the exact hospital name, location, and a picture of the room door. I'll see if I can track the internal IP. But Emily, I have to ask, are you sure you want to see this? Some things, once you see them, you can't unsee. I paused for a moment, Kevin's voice, making me feel like a client hiring a private investigator. But there was no turning back. I said softly, I'd rather be hurt once than live with this doubt for the rest of my life. I'll send you the picture now. Please try to get it to me this morning. Afternoon will be too late. Okay, stay near the hospital somewhere with a decent Wi-Fi signal. I'll let you know how it goes. If I get a link, I'll send it so you can stream it directly. Don't download anything. It could be traced. I hung up, my hand trembling slightly as I opened my camera roll and found the picture of the orthopedic ward room 307 sign I'd sneakily taken on my way down to the garage. After sending it, I turned my laptop on, tethered it to my phone's hotspot, and sat curled up in the driver's seat, listening to the hum of the car's AC. Time crawled by. Every minute felt like an hour, stretching into an agonizing eternity. While I waited, my mind automatically started replaying old memories. I remembered when we first started dating. Michael was so hardworking, so earnest. He would ride his motorcycle all the way from Evanston to Wicker Park just to bring me a container of homemade soup because he heard I was stuck working late on a construction site. Back then, I believed there were still plenty of sincere men in the world. After we got married, he started a small construction supply company. He used to boast to his friends, his arms slung around my shoulders. My wife is a forensic accountant. She's tough. If I do anything crooked, she'll sniff it out immediately. He would laugh, ruffle my hair, and say, "Don't worry, you handle the finances. I'm just out here trying to make a name for us." Those words felt so warm, so reassuring, back then. In recent years, his business had become less stable, less money was coming in. I noticed he was more irritable, often coming home late, smelling of beer and a strange kind of cigarette smoke. But every time I asked, he'd just sigh, "A man has to network. It's tough to land projects these days. Don't make it harder for me." I was so busy, sometimes too exhausted to even breathe, that I let it go. Partly because I trusted him, and partly because I thought a marriage couldn't survive if a wife was always suspicious. It wasn't until today, sitting in this hospital parking garage, clutching my laptop like a life raft, that I realized all this time I had been busy auditing blueprints and cost estimates. But I had completely, catastrophically, forgotten to audit the man sleeping right next to me. By the way, if you're still with me, if you're as desperate for the truth as I was in that moment, make sure to hit that subscribe button. More unbelievable stories are coming, and you won't want to miss what happens next. An hour passed, then another. My eyes started to sting. My neck grew stiff from sitting in one position for so long. Just when I thought Kevin had given up, my phone buzzed repeatedly. A message popped up. Emily, I'm sending you a link. It will only be active for 30 minutes. Then it will expire. When you watch, turn off all external sound and use headphones. Whatever you see, stay calm. Don't do anything rash. I'm serious. I took a deep, shaky breath, plugged my headphones into the laptop, opened a browser, and clicked the link. The screen showed a black window, which a few seconds later resolved into an image. It was a top-down view from a ceiling-mounted camera, black and white, but agonizingly clear. The angle covered most of the room. Michael's bed, the folding chair I always sat in, the door, the small table. The timestamp in the corner read Room 307, 1:58 a.m. I dragged the timeline to around 2 a.m., the precise moment I remembered finally giving in to Michael's insistent pleas to go home, shower, and come back early in the morning. The image was crystal clear. A woman with her hair in a high ponytail, wearing a light jacket. It was me, bustling around, tidying things up, then leaning down to say something to Michael before opening the door and leaving. The door closed, and the room in the video fell utterly silent. Michael lay motionless, like a dead fish. I clenched my fists, my fingers trembling slightly on the trackpad. A tiny, desperate sliver of hope remained. Maybe Sarah had misunderstood. Maybe he just moved a little, not enough to be called faking sleep. But less than a minute later, the thing I dreaded most appeared, stark and undeniable. Michael's eyes snapped open. They were quick, alert, with none of the groggy, pained look he always had around me. He lifted his head, scanned the room, and then propped himself up on his elbows. The movement was sharp, steady, nothing like that of a man with severe fractures who was supposed to be immobilized. I could clearly see his legs, still in their casts, lifting up and down, rotating side to side with casual ease. He even stretched to grab the phone he always hid under his pillow, tapping on it with a look of such calm nonchalance it was impossible to believe. A soft thud echoed in the car. It was the sound of the pen dropping from my hand onto the floor. I bit my lips so hard I could taste blood, but I didn't tear my eyes away from the screen. A few minutes later, the door in the video opened, and Chloe walked in, carrying a large bag. The camera didn't capture smells, but I could almost imagine the scent of fried chicken and warm beer wafting through the screen. As soon as she entered, Chloe grinned. "Brought you the good stuff. Is Emily gone?" Michael, no longer moaning, chuckled, his voice clear, vibrant. "Yeah, she just left. God, I was starving. It's been 3 days of soup and half bowls of whatever bland stuff Emily brought. Hand it over." He snatched the bag. Inside, a box of fried chicken, a few cans of beer. His hands moved nimbly, tearing off a piece of chicken, biting into it with gusto. A stark, sickening contrast to the man who claimed he could barely swallow when I** was there. Chloe sat on the edge of the bed, leaning in to pat his leg through the cast, giggling. "Eat slowly, you'll choke. I was so worried about you. But you have to keep playing the part of the suffering patient. If Emily gets suspicious, the whole thing is ruined." Michael, still chewing, patted her back, then gave her a light slap on the behind, seemingly oblivious to the camera. "You're a great actress, Chloe. Without you helping me, she'd never have bought it. Looks like she's softening up. A few more days, and she'll agree to sell the Lincoln Park brownstone. Once that's sold, we pay off the debts, and we'll still have over $1 million left. Plenty to start over somewhere else." The words, Lincoln Park brownstone, exploded in my head. That was the 3-story house my parents had left me, the deed firmly in my name. When we got married, I'd let Michael live there, but it was always my inheritance, my final safety net if life ever got rough. But in my husband's cynical plan, it was just a life raft for him, a piece of bait to keep his demons at bay. Chloe couldn't hide her excitement. "Are you sure Emily will sell? She seems gentle, but she can be stubborn." "That's why she's easy to fool," Michael scoffed, twisting the cap off a beer and taking a long swig. "I had my doctor friend talk to her, scare her with all the worst-case scenarios. Then I'll act all hopeless, Tell her I'm afraid of being a burden. Emily will always choose to sacrifice. She has a big heart for everyone but herself. You just wait. Once the house is sold, I'll give you half. We can go to Miami or San Diego, open a bar or something. We can live well. No need to stay here and look at her face all day. I saw Chloe lean her head on his shoulder, her voice dropping to a whisper. What about the loan sharks? I heard you owe them a lot. Yeah, well, a debt is a debt. Once we have the money, we can pay it off, he shrugged. I owe them about 200 grand. The interest is piling up, but that house will solve everything. Don't you worry. The important thing is that Emily has to sign the papers. Chloe was quiet for a few seconds, then asked hesitantly, So, when will you divorce her? I saw Michael frown, slightly annoyed at the question, but he quickly forced a reassuring smile. After everything is settled. If I divorce her now, she'll get suspicious, and it'll ruin everything. Don't worry, it's over between us. I mean, what woman could stand a disabled, debt-ridden husband? She'll leave me eventually. Then I'll be the one who was abandoned, the victim. I'll have the money, and I'll have you. Smart, right? I couldn't listen anymore. My headphones were still on, but my lips were salty from biting them so hard I tasted blood. I pulled the headphones off, and the sound of my own ragged breathing filled the silent car, a foreign, guttural noise that didn't feel like it belonged to me. Outside in the parking garage, a few people in white coats walked by silently, their soft-soled shoes making almost no sound. No one knew that inside a small car, right under the hospital, a wife had just witnessed her husband's entire, sickening betrayal. I didn't cry. My eyes were strangely dry, as if my tears were too scared of this monstrous truth to show themselves. The first thing I felt wasn't grief, but raw, searing humiliation. Humiliation for being so utterly underestimated. Humiliated for priding myself on being sharp, on being able to account for every dollar in a multi-million-dollar project, only to let the man I shared my bed with tame me into such an easy mark. I thought of the Lincoln Park brownstone, of the afternoons my dad would sit on the front steps in his old t-shirt, sipping iced tea, watching me come home from school, his eyes always smiling. I thought of my mom, how every Thanksgiving she'd make a huge pot roast, telling me to always cherish the house. If anything ever happens to us, she'd say, This house is your anchor. It's your roots. Those roots, in Michael's eyes, were just collateral for loan sharks. I suddenly burst out laughing, a dry, hollow sound that echoed in the car like a stranger's voice. Anyone passing by would have thought I was having a breakdown, but that laugh was like flipping a switch. In an instant, my mind shifted from panic to ice-cold clarity. I opened my phone and texted Kevin, Save that clip for me. From the moment I left the room until Chloe came in and they talked, get as much of their conversation as you can. I'll save a copy myself. Thank you. I owe you big time for this. Kevin replied immediately, I've already downloaded it, trimmed it, and I'm sending it to you through a secure channel. Keep it safe. Don't let anyone touch it. Do you need me to call someone? Just hearing that made my blood boil. I stared at the words, my lips pressed into a thin, grim line. No, I'm okay. This is my mess. I'll handle it. Please don't tell anyone. Act like this never happened. After sending the text, I sat up straight and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. It reflected a woman with disheveled hair and sunken eyes, but her gaze was no longer trembling. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity. From this second on, the gentle, patient Emily of the past was dead. What was left was Emily, the accountant, the woman of numbers, of balance sheets, of cold, hard audits. The only difference was that this time, the project I needed to audit wasn't a building, but a marriage. I sat in the car for a long time after turning off the video, not because I was still scared, but because I was methodically organizing everything in my head. The images I had just seen no longer terrified me. They were just data, clear, irrefutable evidence. And when things became data, I knew how to handle them. I wiped my face, adjusted my coat, and started the car. Instead of going back to the hospital room as I had promised Michael, I turned the car out of the hospital gates and drove straight home. The familiar streets suddenly felt alien. The tree-lined avenues, the coffee shop where Michael and I used to sit, the bakery I frequented to buy his favorite pastries. They all receded in the rearview mirror like scenes from an old movie, fast-forwarded to skip the painful parts. When I got home, the house was silent, devoid of human warmth. Chloe's shoes were still scattered by the door. Michael's jacket hung on the rack, and the lingering scent of his cologne felt like an insult. I stood in the middle of the living room for a moment before slowly, deliberately locking the door. The soft click of the deadbolt sounded in my heart like a boundary being sealed. The first thing I did was open the safe in our bedroom. Inside were the deed to the Lincoln Park brownstone, my personal savings, bonds, and a few important documents my parents had left me. I took everything out and put it into a large tote bag. Then I opened my laptop and logged into my personal bank account. The password was one Michael used to know. I changed everything. Passwords to my bank accounts, my email, my investment portfolios, one by one, slowly, methodically, with a coldness that surprised even myself. While I was doing this, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. I stayed at it for a few seconds before answering, forcing my voice to sound soft, almost tender. I just got home to grab some more things for you. I'll be back soon. Emily, you've been gone so long. I was worried. Michael's voice came through, weak and pathetic, just like always. Chloe said you hadn't come back yet. I gave a small, brittle laugh. The house was a mess, so I'm tidying up a bit. You just lie still and don't move around. Endure the pain a little longer. I'll be back soon. Okay, try to come back early. I feel so empty here without you, he sighed. After hanging up, I allowed myself a small, bitter smack. If it weren't for that video, I would probably be rushing back right now, worried about his pain, afraid that Chloe was being clumsy. But now, every word he spoke sounded like a line from a poorly written script. I picked up another phone and called Kevin. Kevin, I need you to do one more thing for me. Find out everything you can about Michael's debts, gambling loans over the past year, any companies or individuals, any accounts in his name. See what you can find. Kevin was silent for 2 seconds, then said, Okay, but this will require digging through multiple sources. I suspect he's into some serious loan shark business. A few strange IPs were asking about someone with his name a while back. I'll work on it quickly for you. I hung up and sank onto a chair, leaning my back against the wall. The exhaustion finally hit me, but instead of feeling weak, I felt a small, hot flame burning inside me. It wasn't a raging fire, but a slow, steady heat that would last a very, very long time. That afternoon, I returned to the hospital. As I walked into the room, I saw Michael with his eyes closed, his face contorted as if he just had a spasm of pain. Chloe, standing beside him, greeted me with a feigned cheerfulness. You're back. I just gave Mike his pain medication, so he's feeling a little better now. Okay, let me check on him, I said, walking over and placing my hand on his forehead. It was warm, but no fever. Michael opened his eyes and squeezed my hand tightly. You're back, Emily. I'm in so much pain. I don't know how much longer I can take this. I looked at that face, and for the first time in my life, I felt no sympathy. It was almost comical. Try to hang in there. This afternoon, I have to meet with a lawyer about your accident insurance. They need some additional paperwork, I said, as casually as I could. Michael flinched slightly, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but quickly covered it up. A lawyer? Why does it have to be so complicated? It's a major insurance company. There's a lot of red tape, I replied curtly. Chloe, standing nearby, flinched visibly when she heard the word insurance. I noticed it clearly, even though she tried to hide it with a forced smile. Just then, David, Michael's younger brother, walked in. David was 3 years younger, a delivery driver by trade, a quiet, honest man. Seeing his brother laid up, David was clearly distraught, carrying a large bag of fruit. Emily, how's Mike doing? Mom told me he was in a lot of pain. He's a little more stable now. The doctor said we still need to monitor him, I answered. David looked at Michael, his eyes turning red. Hang in there, bro. We're all worried about you. Michael nodded, his voice choked with feigned emotion. I know. Watching them, I suddenly felt a pang of genuine sorrow for David. He had no idea he was sympathizing with a man putting on a performance, a play staged out of pure greed. For a moment, my heart softened. But then I remembered Michael's alert eyes in the video, his hand slapping Chloe's behind, his chilling words, "Once the house is sold, it's all over." And just like that, any softness in me recoiled like a snail into its shell. In the evening, Sarah came by to check on the room. When she saw me, her gaze lingered a little longer than usual, a silent question in her eyes. I knew she was wondering if I had seen it. I waited until Michael had drifted off from his medication and quietly stepped out into the hallway. Sarah was writing on a chart. I stood beside her and lowered my voice. I saw it. The pen in her hand paused for a beat. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly, her voice low and calm. "So, what are you going to do?" I glanced back toward the room where Michael was lying, then looked back at her. "I can't say right now, but I need you to help me keep this a secret, at least for now." Sarah nodded, without asking any more questions. I knew she was the type of person who only said what was necessary. Her silence at that moment was more valuable to me than 1,000 words of advice. That night, while Chloe was out buying dinner, I sat by the bed, pretending to be exhausted, my head resting on the mattress. Michael thought I was asleep and let out a soft sigh, but I was wide awake, listening to his every breath, just waiting. I opened my phone and texted Kevin. "Anything yet?" The reply came quickly. "I have a preliminary report. He has loans from at least 4 different unofficial lenders. The principal is close to $200,000 with exorbitant interest rates. Some are under his company's name, some personal. He also has a history of online gambling which later moved offline. His bank transactions show traces of money from several loan shark rings. I have screenshots of everything." I read the text with a strange sense of calm. Everything fit together with terrifying precision. The accident, the fake injury, the house, the insurance, the secret text with Chloe. It all came together to form a complete, horrifying picture. I replied to Kevin with one sentence: "Thank you. Keep it safe. I'll need it." Later that night, Michael called his mother. I overheard her voice on the other end of the line, crying and complaining, blaming me for not taking good care of her son, then tactfully bringing up selling the house to save his life. Michael moaned, his voice sounding like it was about to give out. "I've talked to Emily, Mom. I think she's considering it. Don't push her too hard. She's stressed with work. She probably needs time." I sat not far away, hearing every word. My heart was so numb, it surprised me. A whole family, from top to bottom, was colluding to pressure me into willingly offering up the house my parents left me. If I hadn't seen that video, I probably would have collapsed in tears, consumed by guilt. The next morning, my mother-in-law, Helen, came to the hospital. She was thin and haggard. The moment she walked in, she burst into tears. "Oh, my son, why is your life so hard? If anything happens to you, how will I go on?" Michael took her hand, his voice weak. I stood to the side respectfully. "Hello, Mom." She turned to me, her eyes a mix of pleading and reproach. "Emily, I know this is hard on you, but right now the only way is to sell the house to take care of Michael. Don't be so stubborn. If he dies, what's the point of holding on to property?" I looked at her for a long time. This woman was by title my mother-in-law, the person who had taken my hand on my wedding day and told me to think of her as my own mother. But now, in her eyes, all I saw was the fear of losing her son and a vague, calculating look about money. I took a deep breath. "I understand, Mom. I'm thinking about it, but selling a house is a big decision. I need to review all the paperwork and check Michael's insurance policy to avoid any complications later. Please, just give me a little more time." Helen wanted to say more, but David gently pulled her arm. "Mom, let Emily take her time. She's been through a lot these past few days." Helen pursed her lips but said nothing more. But I knew that from this day on, the pressure would only intensify. They would push me to sell the house quickly. Michael and Chloe would act out their parts even more dramatically, and my mother-in-law would be the trump card Michael used to play on my compassion. That afternoon, when everyone else had gone out to eat, and it was just Michael and me in the room. He pulled my hand, his voice a soft, desperate plea. "Emily, have you thought it through? I'm scared that if we wait too long, it will be too late." I looked deep into his eyes, not avoiding his gaze for the first time. "Don't worry. If I sell, I'll sell. But everything has to be clear and transparent. I don't want to lose the money and then be accused of abandoning my husband later." A flicker of relief crossed Michael's eyes. He thought I was finally giving in. But I thought to myself, asterisko, I'll sell it. But not in the way you think that asterisk. After that conversation, Michael's attitude toward me changed noticeably. He became gentler, held my hand more often, and his eyes were always filled with gratitude. He would even shed a tear or two when talking about his fear of becoming a burden to me. If this had been before, I might have believed it was real. But now, for every tear he shed, the image of him munching on fried chicken, drinking beer, and slapping Chloe's behind flashed in my mind. I watched him perform, my heart as cold as ice. My mother-in-law started visiting the hospital almost daily. She stopped her harsh accusations and switched to a softer approach. She would hold my hand and whisper, "Emily, I know you love Michael very much, but our family situation isn't what it used to be. Please, just sacrifice a little. Once he's better and his business is back on its feet, you can buy another house." I would just nod non-committally to get her to stop. David, on the other hand, was different. Every time he came to visit his brother, he would stand quietly in a corner, watching Michael for a long time, as if he wanted to say something, but held back. Once, as I was walking him out, he pulled me aside and whispered, "Emily, Mike has been acting strange lately. Sometimes I walk in unexpectedly and is perfectly still, but other times I can hear him on the phone, and his voice is completely normal. Emily, be careful." I looked at David, my heart stirring. From the outside, it looked like I was being cornered with no one on my side, but it turned out someone else had noticed the inconsistencies. "Thank you, David," was all I could say. That evening, Chloe came back very late. When she entered the room, she was wearing a strange perfume. Michael gave her a quick, sharp look. I noticed everything. Chloe placed a bowl of soup on the table and said softly, "Emily, I have a job interview early tomorrow morning. I probably won't be able to come in and help with Mike as much for the next few days. I hope you understand." I nodded. "Of course, you're young. You have to think about your future. I'm here, and the nurses are here." Chloe kept her head down, avoiding my eyes. She flinched when Michael's hand subtly squeezed hers for a brief second before letting go. My eyes turned cold. I knew she was scared. Scared I would notice. Scared everything would be exposed. And when people get scared, they make mistakes. That night, when the room was quiet, I secretly checked the messages from Kevin. He had compiled a complete file on all of Michael's debts, including transfers he had made to accounts linked to gambling. There was even a recording Kevin had bought from someone in the Loan Shark group. Michael's voice was frantic, promising to get the money by any means necessary within 2 weeks. Listening to it, I closed my eyes. So, that was it. The deadline they were pushing me to sell the house for was actually to save Michael's own skin from his ruthless lenders. I knew I couldn't tip my hand. The moment Michael knew I had the full story, he might do something desperate. I had to continue playing the part of the devoted wife, willing to sacrifice everything for her husband. The next morning, I proactively told my mother-in-law, my voice carefully modulated. "I've thought a lot about it. If selling the house can save Michael, I'll sell it, but I need to work with a bank and a real estate agent to make sure everything is done properly so we get a good price. I don't want to sell it at a loss." My mother-in-law's face lit up with relief and gratitude. "That's wonderful, Day. Thank you. If Michael knew, he would be so happy." She turned to the bed, holding Michael's hand and sobbing dramatically. "Son, your wife has agreed to sell the house. You have to live. I won't let you die." Hearing this, Michael seemed to gain a new burst of energy, his eyes welling up with tears. "Emily, you're my savior. Even if I die, I'll never forget what you've done for me." I smiled and bowed my head. "Don't say that. I'm doing this for our family." But in my heart, a cold voice echoed, Asterisk yes. For our family. But not the family you're scheming for. Asterisk that afternoon. I left the hospital early, using the excuse that I had to go home to find some documents. On the way, I went straight to a law office tucked away in a quiet alley. Mr. Anderson was a lawyer I had worked with on a construction contract dispute, a few years older than me, calm and discreet. After I told him the whole story, from the accident and the camera footage to the debts, he sat in thoughtful silence for a long time. Legally, he finally said, if we can prove that Michael staged the accident or falsified his injuries for insurance fraud, the consequences will be severe. But for now, you shouldn't file a complaint yet. Their plan is to have you willingly sell the house. So, let them believe you're doing just that. In the meantime, my firm will help you gather more concrete evidence. I nodded, my hands resting on his desk, trembling slightly. I don't need them to go to jail right away. I just need to protect my parents' property, and I don't want to be accused of abandoning him later. Mr. Anderson looked at me for a moment and said quietly, "You're stronger than I thought." I gave a weak smile. I'm not strong because I don't feel pain. I'm strong because I can't afford to break down right now. That evening, I returned to the hospital. When Michael saw me arrive late, he was frantic. "Where have you been? I called you several times, but you didn't pick up." "I was meeting with a real estate agent. They looked at the house today. There's a lot of interest, but we haven't settled on a price yet," I replied calmly. Michael's eyes lit up with predatory glee. "Really? How much did they offer?" "Around 800,000, I said slowly. "But I haven't agreed. I want 900,000. That was intentionally lower than the market rate. I quoted a modest price, so they wouldn't suspect I was stalling. As expected, Michael nodded, looking anxious. "Yeah, as long as it sells quickly, that's what matters. We can figure out the price later." I looked at him and said nothing more. In my eyes, his sell quickly meant meeting the deadline for his debts, not for any broken leg. That night, Chloe snuck out again. I pretended not to notice. I needed her to be away from the hospital more often so Michael would lose one of his secret pillars of support. And just as I predicted, without Chloe around, Michael became visibly agitated. His pain started to become inconsistent. Sometimes he would forget his role and sit up a little too straight. I saw it all. 2 days later, my mother-in-law came to rush me about signing the papers to sell the house. I told her the agent required original documents, which would take a few more days. She was clearly displeased, but held her tongue, since she was relying on me. David, however, grew quieter and quieter. Once, while helping me carry things to my car, he suddenly asked, "Emily, if Mike did something wrong, would you forgive him?" I looked straight into his eyes. "What do you think?" David looked down, his voice choked. "I just hope if he's done something wrong, he stops in time." His words made my heart sink for a moment, but then I understood. Some mistakes can't be fixed just by stopping. When you've wagered with money, honor, and even lives, there's no turning back. That night, after Michael fell asleep from his medication, I went out to the hallway and stood by the window, looking down at the dimly lit parking lot. My phone buzzed. A text from Kevin. "The lenders are getting impatient." One of them said, "If it doesn't pay on time, they're coming to the hospital to talk. You need to be careful. I think something is going to happen within the week." I gripped my phone tightly. My time was running out. This play, I had to bring the curtain down before those people made their entrance with violence. I went back into the room and looked at Michael lying peacefully on the bed, his face as innocent as a saint's. I pulled up a chair and sat down, whispering just loud enough for myself to hear, "You're a great actor, Michael, but your leading lady is about to exit the stage." The next morning, I deliberately took the day off work to stay at the hospital. Not to care for Michael, but to wait for the right moment. I felt like someone standing in a dark room, hand on the light switch, just waiting for the perfect instant to flip it and expose everything. Michael was thrilled to see me staying all day. He acted even more intensely than usual, turning on the charm, the helplessness, the profound suffering. Whenever someone came in, he would groan in pain, hold my hand, his voice as thin as a thread. "Emily, don't leave me, please. You're all I have left." My mother-in-law sat beside him, wiping her tears, a picture of familial devotion. David leaned against the door, watching the scene with a look of deep suspicion. As for me, I just silently played my part as a devoted wife so convincingly that sometimes even I was unnerved by my own endurance. Around noon, Chloe returned to the hospital. The moment she walked in, her eyes darted around nervously. When she saw me sitting there, she froze for a second. I smiled at her, a perfectly calm smile. How was the interview? They said they'll call me back for a second round, she stammered. Michael shot her a look, his eyes betraying a hint of impatience. I understood. They were missing their private conversations. I decided to let them fill that void for a little longer. In the afternoon, I called Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson, I've done everything according to the plan. The lenders are starting to make moves. I think they'll show up tonight or tomorrow. His voice was grave. I've already contacted the police. When you give the signal, they'll come in. Remember to stay calm. Don't let them provoke you. I glanced through the glass into the hospital room where Michael was giving his mother a weak smile. I replied softly, I'm calmer than I've ever been. I hung up and put the phone in my bag. The fear was gone. All that was left was a clear sense that it was time to end this. Around 7 p.m., as visiting hours were winding down and my mother-in-law was preparing to leave, Michael suddenly grabbed my hand tightly. Emily, what's the update on selling the house? I looked straight into his eyes, my gaze unwavering. Tomorrow afternoon, they've scheduled an appointment for me at the title company to put down a deposit. If all goes well, we can sign over the deed in 3 days. Michael's eyes lit up with relief, and my mother-in-law was overjoyed. That's great news, dear. Now, I can rest easy. David stood silently for a moment, then asked quietly, Emily, are you sure there won't be any problems? I nodded. Don't worry, David. Around 8 p.m., just after the evening nurse had left and the room had quieted down, the door was suddenly shoved open. 3 strange men walked in. They didn't look like family visitors. Their eyes were cold, their shoulders squared with an intimidating air. The room's atmosphere instantly tensed. The man in the lead scanned the room and then looked directly at Michael. Michael, we're here to visit. Michael's face blanched for a second before he started moaning loudly. Who are you? What are you doing here? I'm seriously injured. My wife is about to sell the house to pay you back. My mother-in-law stood up in alarm. Who are you people? This is a hospital, not a place for you to cause trouble. One of the men sneered. We're just here to check on an old friend. Don't you worry. Their eyes landed on me. I took a step forward, my voice steady, betraying nothing. If you're looking for Michael, state your business. I'm his wife. The man raised an eyebrow. So, you're the wife. Even better, your husband owes us close to $200,000 in principal. The interest isn't small either. He promised he'd have the money in 2 weeks. That deadline is almost up. We just want a clear answer. When do we get paid? A dead silence fell over the room, thick and suffocating. My mother-in-law was trembling, turning to look at Michael, her face a mask of dawning horror. Michael, you owe them that much money. Why didn't you tell me? Michael stammered, sweat pouring down his face. I just borrowed a little for the business. Emily, tell them we're about to have the money. I looked at Michael, my voice chillingly calm, slicing through the tension. Don't worry, there will be money. But it won't be from selling my house. The entire room froze. The 3 men stared at me, their eyes narrowing in confusion, then suspicion. What's that supposed to mean? I took out my phone, pressed a button, and the screen of the wall-mounted TV in the room flickered to life. The security footage from that night appeared. Every frame was crystal clear. Michael sitting up, checking his phone, eating chicken, drinking beer. Chloe sitting close to him, giggling. Their conversation about selling the house, about the debt, about deceiving me, every word echoed through the silent, stunned room. My mother-in-law screamed, "Oh my God! What is this? Michael, what have you done?" David stood as if turned to stone, his face pale with shock. Chloe, pale as a ghost, shrank back against the wall, trying to disappear. And Michael, he could no longer moan. He shot up in a panic, his broken legs slamming down on the bed with a hollow thud. Emily, listen to me. Let me explain. This is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I laughed. A cold, brittle sound. A misunderstanding about you faking a broken leg to trick me into selling my house. Or a misunderstanding about you and Chloe plotting to use my money to pay off your gambling debts. The three lenders looked at each other. The leader nodded and chuckled softly. Well, damn. I never thought Michael had this kind of nerve. I turned to them, my gaze steady. The money he owes you is from his gambling debts. I have nothing to do with it. But I have already spoken with my lawyer and the police. All of this evidence has been sent to them. If you cause any more trouble here, he won't be the only one in a bad spot. The man squinted at me for a long moment, then burst out laughing, a harsh, dismissive sound. Fine, we won't get involved in your family drama. But Michael, you still owe us. This is the last chance we're giving you. They turned and left without another word. The hospital room was plunged into a heavy, suffocating silence. My mother-in-law wailed, beating her fists on Michael's chest. You've ruined me, son. What have you done to get into this mess? David stared at Michael, his eyes filled with heart-wrenching disappointment. You would lie to your wife, lie to your own mother, all for money. Chloe, trembling, sank to her knees. Emily, I was wrong. Michael manipulated me. I never thought it would go this far. Michael looked at me, his eyes for the first time showing his true nature, terrified and desperate. Emily, I'm begging you. Don't leave me. I was wrong. I really was. I looked at him for a long, long time. I wasn't angry anymore, and it didn't hurt like it did at first. All that was left was a deep, profound exhaustion. You weren't wrong just once, Michael. You were wrong the moment you chose to lie. The moment you put my parents' house on the line for your gambling. There was nothing left to save between us. I turned to my mother-in-law, my voice slow and deliberate. Mom, I have given everything to this family. But from today, I am no longer your daughter-in-law. Helen froze, then collapsed onto a chair, a whimpering mess. I looked at David. I'm sorry I couldn't preserve the good image of your brother for you. David was silent, his eyes red with unspoken grief. Then I turned my back and walked away. Behind me, there were cries, calls, and moans. But I didn't stop. Michael's play was over. In my life, from now on, I would right myself. I left the hospital that night. The wind was cold and sharp. The streetlights cast long, pale yellow streaks on the damp asphalt. For the first time in years, I walked through the city without feeling like I belonged anywhere. Before, no matter where I went, I always had a place to return to called home. Now, that home had become a wound, a gaping void. I went back to the house my parents left me, the house that had almost been traded for Michael's dirty bets. The door closed behind me, a final, definitive sound. I leaned against the wall and slid down to the floor, burying my face in my hands. As strong as I had been at the hospital, in the privacy of my own home, I was just as weak. My tears fell, not because I still loved Michael, but for myself, for all the foolish, wasted years. The next morning, I woke up early and called Mr. Anderson. My voice was firm, resolute. Please help me finalize the divorce proceedings as quickly as possible. I don't want to drag this out for another day. Mr. Anderson was silent for a moment, then replied, Rest assured. With all this evidence, the divorce and the division of assets will be very straightforward. You will not be responsible for any of his debts. I nodded. Even though he couldn't see me, what I needed right now wasn't a victory on paper, but a clear line drawn, so I could step out of Michael's life for good. That afternoon, David came to my house. He stood at the gate for a long time before ringing the bell. When I opened the door, he kept his head down. Emily, I'm sorry. I had no idea Michael was like that. If I had known. I looked at him with a mix of sadness and pity. I don't blame you, David. You did nothing wrong. He did. David hesitated. Mom, she was at the hospital all night crying. She regrets pressuring you so many times. This morning, She asked me to come and apologize to you on her behalf. I was quiet for a moment, thinking of my mother-in-law's tormented face yesterday. I couldn't bring myself to resent her completely. She wasn't evil. She was just blinded by her love for her son. Go back and tell your mother I'm not angry, but what's between Michael and me can't be changed. David wiped his eyes with his sleeve. I just hope you can find peace after this. Yes, I said. I hope so, too. After that day, I never went back to the hospital. I delegated all legal matters to my lawyer. I didn't want to see Michael again. Didn't want to hear another excuse from that man. Everything I needed to understand, I already understood. A week later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was my mother-in-law. I was wrong. I only trusted my son and made you suffer. Now, I understand that you were the one who was hurt the most. Her voice trembled, punctuated by labored breaths. I was silent for a long time before I replied. Mom, I don't blame you, but I can't come back. I'm too tired. On the other end of the line, her voice broke, and then there was only the sound of soft, wrenching crying. I hung up, my heart heavy as stone. Some pain comes not from hatred, but from the fact that there is no way back. On the day of the court hearing, Michael was brought in. He was much thinner than before, his face stripped of its former arrogance. When he saw me, a faint glimmer of desperate hope flickered in his eyes. Emily, I know I was wrong. Please tell the judge to give me a chance. I didn't look at him. I looked straight at the judge and read my statement in a calm voice. Every word was like a clean cut, severing what little was left between me and Michael. The divorce was granted quickly. We were officially, legally no longer husband and wife. I was not responsible for any of his debts. The house was still mine. The rest of Michael's life no longer had anything to do with me. Stepping out of the courthouse, I took a deep breath. The sky that day was incredibly blue, so blue that I found myself smiling. It turned out the sky had always been there. It was just that for all those years, I had forgotten to look up. A month later, I moved, not because I was afraid of the memories, but because I wanted to start over in a new place. I requested a transfer to a new branch at my firm. The busy work kept me from dwelling on the past. One afternoon after work, I ran into Chloe in front of a supermarket. She was much thinner, her face bare of its usual makeup. Seeing me, she froze as if she'd been turned to stone. Emily. I nodded, not entirely surprised. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say I was truly wrong. I looked at her, my heart free of hatred. What I had been through had pushed me beyond the limits of blame. You're still young. You made a mistake. You paid the price. Consider it a lesson. Don't make the same mistake again. Chloe burst into tears, nodding repeatedly. I walked away without looking back. To me, Chloe had become a part of the past. Nothing more. That night, I sat alone on the balcony of my new apartment, sipping hot tea and watching the traffic thin out on the street below. A light breeze blew, and my heart was surprisingly calm. There was no more wrenching pain, no resentment, no self-torment, just a light emptiness, like the sky after a storm, with only a few thin clouds remaining. I knew I wasn't fully healed, but I also knew I was on the right path. Life is harsh, but it is also fair. It took a husband from me, but it gave me back myself, a person far more clear-eyed and resilient than before. After the chance encounter with Chloe, I thought my heart was calm enough to be undisturbed by any ripples from the past. But life rarely lets a person off that easily. One Monday morning, as I arrived at the office, the receptionist told me someone was there to see me, a relative of my ex-husband. I paused, a faint, uneasy feeling flickering through me. Standing in front of my office door was my former mother-in-law. She was much thinner than the last time I'd seen her. Her hair was almost completely white. Her back was stooped, and the lines around her tired eyes had deepened. Seeing me, she looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't. After a long moment, she finally spoke. Emily, can I talk to you for a minute? I was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. I no longer resented her, but I also didn't feel close enough to call her mom anymore. We sat at a small cafe near my office. She clutched a faded cloth bag in her hands, her voice trembling. Michael, is about to be transferred to another facility for further investigation into his debts. They said his sentence might be extended. These past few days, he's been begging to see you. He says he just needs to talk to you one more time before he's moved. Emily, I know I have no right to ask this of you, but I'm his mother. I can't bear it. She bowed her head very low. I heard in her voice not the coercion of before, but the bitter helplessness of a mother watching her son fall without being able to catch him. The doctor said he's suffering from exhaustion and his mental state is unstable. I'm just afraid he might do something desperate. Hearing that, my heart tightened. No matter how much Michael had hurt me, I didn't want him to choose that path. After a long silence, I finally said slowly, I will go see him once, but only once. My former mother-in-law's eyes lit up, as if she had just been saved. She clasped her hands in front of her chest. Thank you, Emily. I'm truly grateful. 2 days later, I went to the detention center. The iron gate clanged shut behind me, a cold, heavy sound that echoed the finality of the moment. In the small, cramped visiting room, I sat across from Michael, separated by a thick pane of glass. He was gaunt, his eyes sunken, his former arrogance completely gone. When he saw me, he looked as if he couldn't believe his eyes. Emily, you actually came. I nodded slightly, my voice even. You said you wanted to see me, so I'm here. If you have something to say it quickly. Michael lowered his head, his shoulders trembling. After a moment, he looked up, his eyes red and pleading. I know I have nothing left to say to defend myself. I just want to say one thing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for ruining your life. I looked deep into his eyes, feeling no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet, profound exhaustion. Does saying sorry now change anything? Michael shook his head, a single tear rolling down his cheek. No, it doesn't change anything. But if I don't say it, I'm afraid I won't be able to get through the years ahead. I was silent for a long time. In that moment, I realized the man sitting in front of me was no longer the Michael I had once loved, nor was he the deceitful man from the video. He was just a defeated, broken man, stripped bare before the consequences of his own actions. Emily, if I could go back, I would rather have never met you than have met you and hurt you like this. I smiled faintly, a sad, belated acceptance. If we had never met, maybe I wouldn't have learned what it means to trust the wrong person, or what it means to stand up after being broken. You taught me a very expensive lesson, but I paid my dues. The rest is for you to carry. Michael stared at me as if trying to bane my image into his memory for this final meeting. His voice was barely a whisper. Emily, will you be okay? I will be, I answered succinctly. I stood up, placed my hand on the glass, and said my last words. Let's end it here, Michael. I don't hate you anymore, but I can't go back. Don't hold on any longer. He placed his hand on his side of the glass, our palms meeting across an unbridgeable distance. I turned and walked away, my heart feeling incredibly light. Stepping out of the detention center gates, the afternoon sun felt strangely warm on my face. I knew I had just closed a chapter of my life for good. In the time that followed, life was quiet. My career was stable. I was promoted to a new position. More pressure, but also more rewarding. David still called occasionally to check in. He told me his mother's health was declining. I asked him to take care of her on my behalf, but I didn't have the courage to revisit that past again myself. One evening, I received a text from an unknown number. Emily, it's Chloe. I just wanted to say thank you for not pushing me to the brink. I looked at the message for a long time, then replied simply, live an honest life. Chloe, that's enough. I put my phone down, feeling a sense of peace. Everyone has to walk the path they choose. I was no longer responsible for carrying anyone else's burden. That night, I stood at the window of my apartment, watching the city lights come on. The lights from thousands of small windows reflected against the dark sky like man-made stars. I suddenly realized that no matter how dark life gets, there is always light, as long as you're willing to open your eyes and see it. I had once lived in the shadow of someone else's mistakes, but from now on, I would live in the light of my own choices. After seeing Michael in the detention center, It felt like a heavy door in my heart had finally closed. The sleepless nights grew fewer and the dull ache in my chest lessened. I started getting used to the new rhythm of life as a single woman, free but also solitary. Work during the day, home at night, occasional coffee with colleagues on weekends. Life passed without drama or tragedy, but also without the rose-tinted illusions of the past. One rainy afternoon, just as I was leaving work, David called. His voice was choked with emotion. "Emily, Mom, she's very weak. The doctor says it's only a matter of days. She keeps asking for you. Could you come for a little while?" I held the phone for a long time without answering. The rain was coming down hard outside, each drop hitting the car window with a dull tap. I had told myself so many times that I wouldn't go back, but standing on the line between reason and humanity, I was still the one with a soft heart. "Send me the address. I'll be there." The old hospital still had that familiar smell of antiseptic. When I walked into the room, my former mother-in-law lay motionless on the bed, her face gaunt, her eyes sunken, her breath as faint as a fragile thread. David sat by her bed, holding her hand. He jumped up when he saw me. "Emily." I nodded and walked closer. My mother-in-law struggled to open her eyes. When she saw me, a faint light flickered in her gaze. "Emily, you came." I leaned down and took her frail hand. The same hand that had so often pointed at me in accusation now felt like just cold, trembling bones. "Yes, I'm here." Tears welled in her eyes and streamed down her temples. "I wronged you so much, Emily. My whole life, I only saw my son. I didn't see his true nature, and I let you suffer." I squeezed her hand gently, my voice slow. "It's in the past. I don't blame you anymore." She began to cry audibly, her chest heaving weakly. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just hope if there's a next life that I don't get to be your mother-in-law, so that I can be a stranger and treat you with the kindness you deserve." Those words felt like a gentle knife slicing through my heart. I bowed my head, my own tears falling onto her dry, wrinkled hand. "In this life, our debt to each other is paid. You can rest now." She nodded faintly, her breathing slowing until the line on the heart monitor stretched into a long, flat tone. David broke down in sobs, but I just stood there silently, my heart empty. It wasn't the pain of losing my own parents, just a deep, weary sadness, like closing the final chapter of a relationship that had reached its absolute end. The funeral was simple. I was there for the whole thing, fulfilling my final duty as a daughter-in-law. Relatives looked at me with a mixture of curiosity, pity, and unease. I didn't care. I was just doing what my conscience told me was right. Michael was not allowed to attend. I heard he had requested leave from the facility, but was denied. I looked at his mother's portrait and wondered how much pain she was in. At the end, knowing her son was lost, but it was all too late. After the service, David walked me to my car. He bowed his head low. "Emily, I don't think I can ever repay your kindness." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just live a good life, David. That's enough. Don't let your mother worry about you from the other side." He nodded, his eyes red. Returning to my small apartment, I locked the door and leaned against it. For the first time in a very long time, I cried out loud. Not for Michael, not for his mother, but for a painful chapter of my life that had officially ended. I cried as if to say goodbye to the person I used to be, the blind, submissive woman who lived for others until she forgot herself. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work as a way of saving myself. I was put in charge of a large project that required constant travel. The busy pace left me little time to think. I realized I was much stronger than I had ever imagined. On a work trip to another city during a dinner with business partners, I met Daniel, the lead engineer. He was reserved with a calm gaze. He wasn't overly friendly or curious about my personal life. Our conversation was just about work, life, and family. When he walked me to my car, he smiled. "It was really nice talking with you tonight, Emily. If you don't mind, I'd like to take you out for coffee the next time you're in town." I was a little surprised, but I nodded. "Okay." On the way back to my hotel, I realized my heart wasn't as tightly sealed as before. I was no longer terrified of meeting a new man. nor did I feel pressure to either pursue or avoid a relationship. I was simply letting things happen as they would. That night, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. The woman looking back at me no longer had that old sad look. Instead, her gaze was calm, experienced, and self-possessed. I found myself smiling, a smile I hadn't seen on my own face in years. My life had lost so much, a marriage, a home, a sense of trust. But I had also gotten myself back, a person no longer living in fear and dependency. And I knew that ahead of me, a new path was quietly opening up. It wasn't loud or colorful, but it held hope. After that business trip, Daniel and I stayed in touch. It wasn't a whirlwind of messages, just occasional texts checking in on work. Sometimes he'd send me a picture of a construction site in progress. Other times, I'd send him a newly completed blueprint. It was gentle, like a small stream trickling through rocks. Not loud, but enough to let you know you were no longer standing alone in an empty space. One weekend afternoon, Daniel texted me, "Are you busy? I'm near your neighborhood. Could I buy you a coffee?" I looked out at my balcony. The sky was clear, the breeze was light. It was a rare afternoon when I wasn't buried in paperwork. I replied, "I'll be right down." The small coffee shop was tucked away on a tree-lined street. Daniel was already there. When he saw me walk in, he stood up and pulled out my chair. He was the same as always, calm, polite, without a single wasted gesture. We talked about work at first, then gradually drifted to other lighter topics. Daniel asked very gently, "Have you been living alone for long?" I stayed into my coffee cup for a moment before answering, "I got divorced a little over a year ago." Daniel just nodded, not pressing for details. A moment later, he said simply, "I've been through a loss myself. I married young. My wife passed away in a car accident 4 years ago. Since then, it's mostly been just me and my work." For the first time, I saw a deep sadness in his eyes, but it wasn't tragic. It was quiet, like the surface of a still lake. I suddenly understood why he wasn't in a hurry about anything. We didn't speak of it again, as if we had a silent understanding that some pains don't need to be aired out with too many words. After that day, Daniel started visiting me occasionally. Sometimes he'd bring a bag of fruit. Other times, just a cup of hot cocoa in the evening. He never overstepped, never demanded anything. He arrived at a reasonable time and left at a reasonable time. That respect for boundaries made me feel safe. One day, David called me with news that made me freeze. "Michael, he had a stroke in the facility. He's in the ICU right now." I went silent, the old memories stirring like a thin layer of dust blown into the air. "You don't have to go," David added quickly. "I just wanted to let you know." I stood by the window for a long time watching the people below. Part of me wanted to turn away, but another part remembered the years I had called that man my husband. Finally, I sighed. "What's the hospital address? I'll stop by for a bit." This time, I wasn't going as a wife or a relative. I was going as an old acquaintance visiting a piece of my past. Michael lay on the hospital bed, his body frail, one side of his face drooping from the stroke. When he saw me, his eyes widened and his lips trembled, but he couldn't form any words. David stood beside him, his voice choked. "The doctor said he's past the critical stage, but he'll likely have paralysis on one side." I looked at Michael, my heart not aching as I thought it would. All I felt was a faint, distant pity, like seeing a stranger suffering the consequences of his own choices. I walked closer, looked directly into his eyes, and spoke slowly, just loud enough for him to hear. "Michael, can you hear me? Live the rest of your life as best you can. The past between us. I'm not angry anymore, but we can't go back. Don't hold on." A single tear escaped from the corner of his paralyzed eye. I couldn't tell if it was genuine remorse or just fear of the difficult road ahead. I no longer cared to distinguish between the two. Leaving the hospital, I felt a strange sensation. Not complete relief, but not heavy either. It was like setting down something I had been carrying on my shoulder for too long. My hands were finally free. That evening, Daniel was waiting for me at the entrance of my building. He looked at me intently. "Are you tired?" I nodded slightly, not saying much. He just opened the car door for me, turned on the heater, and drove in silence. That silence didn't feel lonely. On the contrary, it felt safe. When the car stopped in front of my building, he said, "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." I turned to look at him. The streetlight cast a gentle, steady glow on his face. For the first time in many years, my heart fluttered, not from pain, but from a warm, tentative, yet genuine feeling. "Thank you," I said softly. He nodded, not pushing me to say more. In the following days, I was busy rearranging my life. I had my mother-in-law's ashes moved back to her hometown, as David had wished. I lit incense for her one last time, standing before her new grave for a long time. I no longer called her mom in my heart, but I bowed my head as someone who had once been family. On the way back, I texted Daniel, "I'm doing better now." He replied instantly, "That's good to hear. When you're free, let me take you to dinner." I looked at the message and smiled a very different smile. No longer timid. I knew I was strong enough to take another step forward, not to forget the past, but to keep the past from holding me back. After Daniel's dinner invitation, I didn't reply right away. Not because I was hesitant, but because I wanted to ask myself one clear question. What am I still afraid of? I had been afraid of loving, of trusting, of even starting over. But I now understood that if I kept my heart locked up out of fear, I would spend my whole life on the defensive. I texted him back, "I'm free this weekend." Daniel replied with a single word. Okay, but that one word was enough to make my heart feel warm. That weekend, we met at a small restaurant by the river. It wasn't fancy, just a few wooden tables under strings of yellow lights with a cool breeze blowing in from the water. Daniel arrived early as always. He stood up when he saw me, his eyes not hiding his pleasure. Was the traffic bad? I shook my head. No, the cab ride was quick. We ordered simple dishes and talked not about work, not about the past, just about everyday things. The food from his hometown, a childhood memory of mine, whether we preferred coffee or tea in the morning. I suddenly realized it had been a very long time since I'd been able to talk to a man without feeling tense or guarded. After dinner, Daniel took me for a walk along the riverbank. The wind blew through my hair. He walked beside me, keeping a comfortable distance. After a while, he spoke slowly. "Emily, I know you've been through a lot. I don't want to pressure you, but I want to be clear. I care for you as a man, for a woman." My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my voice steady. "Thank you for being direct, and I want to be honest, too. I'm not ready to jump into a new relationship so quickly." Daniel nodded, not a hint of disappointment in his eyes. "I don't need an answer right now. I just want you to know that I'm here and I can be patient." I looked at him, a strange feeling rising inside me. It wasn't an explosion of emotion, but a rare kind of peace. The peace that comes from being respected. That night at home, I sat by the window for a long time. I thought about Michael, about my old marriage, about the past hurts. It was strange. Once my heart was calm enough, I could think of his name without a sharp pang of pain. He was just a part of a life that was over, a chapter that wasn't beautiful, but had to exist to lead me to where I was today. A few days later, David called again. This time, his voice was more tired. "Emily, Mike is getting weaker. He has almost no movement on one side. The doctors say any recovery will be very limited." I listened silently. "I'm just calling to let you know," he said. "I don't dare ask you to come in anymore." I looked out at the light rain falling outside and said slowly, "Thanks for letting me know. If you need any help that's within my means, just ask." David's voice choked up. "You're still so good to our family. We owe you so much." After the call, I let out a soft sigh. I no longer held any resentment for that family. All the debts, rights, and wrongs and losses had been paid in full over the past few years. I had kept only one thing for myself, the refusal to let my heart become bitter. Another evening, Daniel took me to see a plot of land on the outskirts of the city where his company was planning a new project. I went along just to offer my professional opinion for the bid. But during that trip, I saw more of who he was. Daniel was serious about his work, spoke respectfully to his partners, and was never boastful or hot-tempered. When I asked for his expert opinion, he listened carefully never interrupting or imposing his own views. On the way back, as the car moved slowly down a tree-lined road, Daniel suddenly asked, "Emily, if you were ready one day, would you give me a chance?" I turned to look at him. His eyes were not pushy or demanding, just filled with a patient, dignified hope. I didn't answer right away. "I need time," I said, "and maybe a little courage. I can't promise anything, but I won't close myself off anymore." Daniel smiled. "That's enough for me." In the days that followed, Daniel and I saw each other more often, but we still maintained a comfortable distance. I began to realize that I was changing, too. I was no longer afraid when I thought of the word future. I no longer assumed that happiness was a fragile thing destined to break. I was learning to live slowly, to appreciate the small moments. And most importantly, I was learning to trust again, cautiously, but not with a closed heart. One afternoon, I went to visit my parents' graves. Standing before the two simple headstones, I lit incense and bowed my head for a long time. I whispered as if to myself, "Mom, Dad, I made it through. I'm not that weak little girl anymore." The wind blew softly through the grass. I felt as if somewhere my parents were smiling. That evening, Daniel picked me up from my hometown. I felt a strange warmth in my heart. Between a woman like me who was so familiar with betrayal and a man like him who had known great loss, we weren't rushing into anything. We were walking side by side, slowly, carefully but sincerely. I knew the road ahead was still long, and I couldn't predict the future. But 10 years from now, if I were to look back on this period of my life, I believe I wouldn't regret giving myself a chance to live differently. Time passed slowly like a quiet river. Daniel and I didn't call each other boyfriend and girlfriend, nor did we rush to define our relationship. We were simply present in each other's lives, just enough not to lose one another, and just enough not to feel suffocated. I found a new kind of peace, not because I had someone by my side, but because I myself was no longer trembling at the thought of change. One early winter morning, David called. This time, his voice was different. Heavy. He didn't make it. I stood silently by the window, my hand gripping the phone. Outside, yellow leaves were falling in the wind. I knew this day would come sooner or later, but hearing the news still made my heart skip a beat. When did it happen? Early this morning, the stroke got worse. There was no time. I didn't cry. I just felt a stillness inside me, like standing before a grave that had long been prepared in my mind. Will you come see him one last time?" David asked, his voice hesitant, not daring to push. I was silent for a few seconds, then said, "I'll come not as an ex-wife, but as someone who had shared a part of his life's journey." Michael's funeral wasn't large, just his father's side of the family and a few old acquaintances. When I walked in, David's eyes turned red. He gripped my hand tightly, his own hand trembling. "Thank you for coming." I nodded. In the cold funeral home, Michael lay in his casket, his face peaceful. I stood for a long time looking at him. There was no more blame, no more pity, just a vague sense of regret for a life that went down the wrong path and couldn't find its way back. His mother was gone, so there was no one to cry for him a final time. David handled everything. Watching him dressed in mourning clothes, I felt a surge of compassion. Life had taken so much from him in just a few short years. His mother, his brother, the family he once had. As I lit a stick of incense before Michael's casket, I whispered in my heart, "From now on, all debts between us are settled." The smoke rose and dissipated into the air. I turned and walked away, my steps no longer heavy. Outside, Daniel was waiting for me. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a tissue when he saw my eyes were red. His silent presence was a comfort. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I'm okay," I replied. "It's just closing one more door." He nodded, saying nothing more, and simply walked beside me all the way home. After Michael's funeral, everything truly came to a close. David moved back to his hometown to look after the family graves. He texted me, "I guess it's time for me to live my own life now, Emily." I read his message with a mix of sadness and relief. Sometime later, Daniel took me to meet his mother. She was a gentle woman with silver-streaked hair who spoke slowly. I was nervous like a young girl, even though my heart had been broken once before. She looked at me carefully and then smiled. "You must be Emily. Daniel talks about you a lot." I bowed my head respectfully. During dinner, no one asked too much about my past. The conversation was simple and about everyday things. The kindness, free of curiosity, put me at ease. As I was leaving, Daniel's mother took my hand. "You've been through a lot. From now on, just think of this as your home." A single sentence, and it made my eyes sting. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to me with such simple, unconditional kindness. On the way home, Daniel asked, "Did you feel pressured?" I shook my head. "No, you and your mother made me feel very safe." Daniel smiled, his eyes softening. "I just want you to feel at peace when you're with me." That night back home, I looked in the mirror for a long time. The woman staring back was different. She was no longer suspicious or overly defensive, just carefully optimistic. A week later, Daniel gave me a small box. He didn't kneel or use flowery words. He just looked at me and said slowly, "Emily, I can't promise you a perfect life, but I promise I will never deceive you. I will never abandon you, and I will be with you when you need me. If you are ever ready to take another step, I want to be the one to take it with you." Inside the box was a simple ring, a delicate silver band. I held it in my hand, feeling a strange sense of steady, quiet trust. I didn't answer right away. I gently closed the box and looked at Daniel. "Give me a little more time. Not because I don't trust you, but because I want to be completely ready when I step forward." Daniel nodded, not at all disappointed. "I can wait." I left with the small box in my purse. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about the path I had traveled from a wife waiting by a hospital bed to a woman standing before a new chance at happiness. That path was filled with wreckage. But because of it, I knew I was no longer the naive girl I once was. I didn't know what the future held. But this time, I wasn't walking into it blindly. I was walking with clarity, with healed scars, and with just enough hope. I kept that small box in my drawer for days, never opening it, but never returning it to Daniel either. It wasn't because I doubted my feelings for him, but because a deep-seated fear remained. The fear of misplacing my trust again, of watching happiness crumble into dust. One evening, I made up my mind. I texted Daniel, "I'm free tomorrow. If you have time, let's meet." He replied almost instantly, "Okay, I'll pick you up." We didn't go to a restaurant or a coffee shop. Daniel drove me to the countryside to a small date road that ran alongside a freshly harvested rice field. The late afternoon sky was clear, the air was cool, and the scent of dry straw hung in the air. He stopped the car. "I thought you might like it, hey?" I got out and a sense of calm washed over me. We walked slowly along the path. After a while, I spoke. "Daniel, have you ever regretted waiting for someone for so long?" He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "Sometimes when I was lonely, I wondered. But then I thought, if you rush into holding the wrong hand just to avoid being alone, the price is even higher. I'd rather wait for the right thing than rush into the wrong one." His words touched the softest part of my heart. I stopped and looked at him directly. "I don't want to enter a relationship because I'm afraid of being lonely. I only want to enter one when I truly feel safe." He nodded, his gaze steady. "I know and I respect that." I took a deep breath, my hand unconsciously touching the purse where I had brought the small box. After a long moment, I took it out and placed it in his hand. "Daniel, I can't say yes right now, but I want to thank you for coming into my life with such kindness. I don't want to make you wait indefinitely." Daniel opened the box, looked at the ring, and then looked at me. He wasn't sad or disappointed. He just smiled gently. "I still want to wait if you'll let me. Not with this ring, but with my presence in your life." At that moment, I realized I was no longer afraid of the word wait, because this time the person waiting wasn't demanding, and the person being waited for wasn't being forced. "Okay," I said softly. "Let's just keep walking together like this. No rush." Daniel nodded, a rare, bright smile spreading across his face. The months that followed were a time of quiet stability. I slowly realized that a mature love wasn't a violent storm, but a quiet, steady stream. One evening, while Daniel and I were at his house looking over some blueprints, his mother brought out 2 cups of hot tea. She smiled at me. "Emily, I just want you to know one thing. You are always welcome in this house, no matter who you are or where you've been." I bowed my head, my lips trembling. It was the greatest acceptance I could have asked for. That night when I got home, I opened the drawer and took out the small box. The ring lay quietly inside. I suddenly understood that some promises don't need to be spoken aloud. They just need to be held patiently in the heart. I hadn't put on the ring yet, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the day I might. Spring arrived slowly that year. I stood by my apartment window, watching the city below, and realized it had been a very long time since I had felt so peaceful. The nightmares had stopped. The random stabs of pain were gone. That afternoon, Daniel drove me to David's new town. His small repair shop was on a dusty country road. David was leaner, his skin tanned by the sun, but his eyes were brighter than ever. "Emily, Daniel, come on in." He smiled, the genuine smile of a man who had put his life back together on his own terms. That night, as Daniel drove me home, I opened my purse and took out the small box. My hand was steady, my heart beating slowly but clearly. "Open it," I said. He did. The silver ring lay quietly in his palm. I spoke slowly, each word carefully considered. "I can't promise we'll never argue or be sad. I can't promise I'll be a perfect wife. But I know one thing. If I don't step forward today, I might spend the rest of my life standing behind my fear, and I don't want that anymore." Daniel looked at me for a long time, his eyes welling up. He didn't say a word, just gently took the ring and slid it onto my finger. It fit perfectly as if it had been made for me. "Marry me in your own way, Emily," he whispered. "Let time answer for everything else." I nodded. I didn't cry. I just felt a quiet warmth spreading through my chest. My wedding to Daniel was small, just close friends and family, including David. Standing in my simple white dress, I thought of the woman I used to be, the one who collapsed in that hospital, who endured a marriage full of lies. I finally understood that the path to peace isn't about forgetting everything, but about daring to look your wounds in the eye and then walking forward without trembling. Daniel and I moved into a small house he owned, and every evening, a warm yellow light shone from the windows. There was the sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen. There was someone waiting for me to come home. And that, after everything, was more than enough. Sometimes I still dreamed of Michael, but he passed by like a stranger now. There were no more debts between us. I would wake up feeling only peace. One morning, as I was drinking tea on the porch, Daniel put a hand on my shoulder. "Emily," he said softly, "I've never asked about your past, but I want to tell you one thing. I'm grateful that you were strong enough to get here." I took his hand, and I'm grateful that you waited. We looked at each other. No more words needed. Life has losses that can never be replaced. I lost a marriage. I lost trust. I lost years of my youth to anguish. But in return, I learned to stand tall. I learned the value of kindness, of choosing the right people, and of trusting myself. If I hadn't seen that security footage, if I hadn't dared to face the truth, I might still be living in a beautiful lie today. And if I hadn't been brave enough to let go of the past, I would never have found this peaceful present. In the end, I understood something very simple. Happiness isn't about never being broken. Happiness is having the courage to trust, to live, and to love again after you've been shattered, with a heart that knows pain but no longer holds on to resentment. It's about choosing your own life, no matter how late it seems. Sometimes letting go isn't a loss, but the beginning of a new life. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between a comfortable lie and a painful truth? What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.